The willow tree had stood by the river's edge for longer than anyone in the valley could remember, its pale roots sprawling like ancient fingers into the water. And it was those same gnarled roots that held the orc girl suspended above the churning floodwaters when Owen Varrick found her at dawn. He had been checking the boundary of his small farm, looking for damage after 3 days of relentless rain, had swollen the creek into a raging torrent that had swept away half his chicken coop and knocked down a section of fence. The storm had finally broken in the night, leaving the world washed clean and eerily still, the only sound the angry rush of water where normally there was barely a trickle. Owen had not expected to find anything more serious than fallen branches and debris, certainly not a living person caught in the willow's embrace like some strange river offering. She hung there motionless, her muscular arms twisted in the roots, her head lolled forward so that her black hair hung in a sodden curtain over her face. For a moment, Owen thought she might be dead, but then he saw the slight rise and fall of her broad shoulders, the way her fingers twitched against the pale wood. She wore the remnants of leather armor, the kind orc raiders favored, though it was torn and waterlogged now, hanging loose on her frame. Her green skin looked almost gray in the early morning light, mottled with bruises and scratches. Owen stood on the muddy bank for a long moment, his heart hammering in his chest. He knew what his neighbors would say if they saw him helping an orc. They would call him a traitor, a fool, maybe worse. The border villages had been raiding each other for generations, humans and orcs locked in an endless cycle of violence and mistrust. Just last spring, an orc war party had burned out the Hendersons' farm 5 miles south, leaving old Thomas with burns that still had not fully healed. Everyone knew orcs were dangerous, savage, not to be trusted. But looking at her now, unconscious and vulnerable, Owen could not see a threat. He saw someone who would drown if the water rose any higher, whose arms would eventually give out if she was not freed from the roots that both trapped and saved her. He saw someone who needed help, and that was all that mattered in the end. He waded into the cold water, gasping as it rose to his waist, then his chest. The current pulled at him, trying to sweep his feet out from under him, but Owen had grown up by this river and knew how to read its moods. He braced himself against the willow's thick trunk and reached for the girl, working carefully to untangle her arms from the roots without dropping her into the flood. She was heavy, all solid muscle and dense bone, and it took all his strength to keep her head above water as he freed first one arm, then the other. The moment she came loose, the current grabbed them both. Owen barely managed to keep his grip on her as the water tried to tear her away, his boots slipping on the muddy riverbed. He fought his way back to shore inch by inch, dragging her with him, until finally he was able to haul them both onto solid ground. They collapsed together in the mud, Owen gasping for breath, the girl still unconscious beside him. Up close, Owen could see she was younger than he had first thought, maybe 19 or 20, close to his own age of 23. Her face was strong-featured, with high cheekbones and a broad nose, her lower jaw showing the points of small tusks. There was a gash on her temple that had bled significantly, matting her hair with dried blood, and her breathing was shallow and labored. She needed warmth, shelter, and medical attention, none of which he could provide here on the muddy riverbank. Owen looked back toward his farmhouse, a small, sturdy building of wood and stone that sat on a rise about a quarter-mile from the river. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a loft, but it was home, and more importantly, it was empty except for him. His father had died 2 winters ago, his mother 3 years before that, leaving Owen alone to work the small farm that had been in the Varrick family for 3 generations. He had no close neighbors, the nearest being old Marcus Vance 1.5 miles to the west, which meant he could get the girl inside without anyone seeing. What he would do with her after that, Owen had no idea, but first things first. He managed to get her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, grunting under her weight. She was easily as heavy as a full-grown man, her solid frame dense with muscle. Owen's legs shook as he stood, but he steadied himself and started the long walk back to the house, his boots squelching in the mud with every step. By the time he reached his front door, his shoulders were screaming and his lungs burned, but he did not stop until he had carried her inside and laid her carefully on his bed. The room was cold, the fire having died sometime in the night, so Owen quickly set about building a new one in the hearth. Once he had flames crackling cheerfully, he turned his attention back to the girl. Her wet clothes were plastered to her skin, and he knew he needed to get them off before she caught her death from the cold, but the thought made him deeply uncomfortable. It felt like a violation, even if it was necessary. In the end, he compromised. He removed her torn leather armor and her boots, then covered her with thick wool blankets, tucking them around her carefully. He would leave the rest for her to deal with when she woke up, assuming she woke up. The wound on her head worried him, as did her labored breathing and the blue tint to her lips. Owen had seen enough injuries in his life to know she might have damage he could not see, broken ribs or internal bleeding. He boiled water and cleaned the gash on her temple as best he could, then bandaged it with clean linen strips. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost cold, and he piled more blankets on top of her, trying to warm her up. There was nothing else he could do now except wait and hope. Owen pulled a chair over beside the bed and sat down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue was fading, leaving him shaky and drained. He should get up, should check on the rest of the farm, should do a dozen things, but instead he just sat there watching the rise and fall of her breathing, making sure it did not stop. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, streaming through the small window above the bed. Owen dozed in his chair, jerking awake every time her breathing changed or she made a sound. Around midday, he finally forced himself to get up and make something to eat, heating up leftover stew from the night before. He tried to get some of the broth between her lips, but most of it just ran down her chin, so he gave up and ate alone, watching her from the table. It was late afternoon when she finally stirred. Owen was back in his chair, whittling a piece of wood more out of nervous energy than any real purpose, when he heard her groan softly. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing eyes the color of amber, bright and startling in her green face. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, disoriented, then her gaze slid sideways and found him. They looked at each other in silence. Owen saw the confusion in her expression shift to wariness, then to something like fear as she took in her surroundings, the unfamiliar room, the human man sitting beside her bed. She tried to sit up, but the movement made her gasp in pain and she fell back against the pillow, her hand going to her ribs. "Easy," Owen said, setting down his knife and wood. "You are hurt. You need to stay still." She stared at him, her amber eyes wide and wary. "Where am I?" Her voice was rough, probably from swallowing half the river, but it was also surprisingly soft, almost melodic. "My farm, about 5 miles north of the border villages. I found you caught in the willow roots by the river. The flood must have swept you downstream." She processed this information, her gaze moving around the room again, cataloging details. "You are human." "I am." "Why did you help me?" It was a fair question, one Owen had been asking himself all day. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "I could not just leave you to drown." She studied his face as if searching for deception, then winced and touched her head, finding the bandage he had placed there. "How long have I been here?" "Since dawn. It is late afternoon now. I need to leave." She tried to sit up again, more carefully this time, but her face went pale and she had to grab the edge of the bed to steady herself. "You cannot even stand," Owen pointed out. "You have a head wound and probably broken ribs. If you try to walk anywhere, you will just hurt yourself worse." "I cannot stay here." There was an edge of panic in her voice now. "If anyone finds me, if your people see me here, they will kill me. They will kill you too, probably, for harboring an orc." "No one is going to find you. I live alone and my nearest neighbor is more than a mile away. You are safe here, at least until you are well enough to travel." She looked at him with such naked suspicion that Owen felt a pang of sadness. How terrible must her experiences with humans have been to make her so afraid even when she was completely helpless. "Why would you risk that?" she asked. "You do not know me. I could be a raider, a killer. I could murder you in your sleep." "Could you?" Owen asked mildly. "Because right now it looks like you can barely stay conscious, let alone murder anyone." Despite herself, the ghost of a smile touched her lips, there and gone in an instant. "You have a point. What is your name?" She hesitated, as if even that small piece of information was too dangerous to share, then said, "Kerra." "I am Owen. Owen Varrick. This is my farm, my home. You are welcome to stay here until you are healed, Kerra. No strings attached, no expectations." "I just want to help." Kerra stared at him for a long moment, and Owen could see her trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, exhaustion seemed to win out over caution, and she slumped back against the pillows. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. "That is all right. You do not have to. Just rest now. We can figure everything else out later." Her eyes were already drifting closed, her body surrendering to the healing pull of sleep. Owen watched her for a moment, then got up and went to tend to the evening chores, trying to process the fact that he now had an orc living in his house. And that somehow, against all logic and reason, that felt like exactly the right thing. The next few days fell into an uneasy routine. Kerra slept most of the time, her body working to heal itself, and Owen worked the farm as he always had, coming in periodically to check on her and make sure she had food and water. They did not talk much at first, their conversations limited to practical matters. Did she need anything? How was her pain? Could she eat solid food yet? Owen learned that she had indeed been swept away by the flood, though she would not tell him what she had been doing near the river in the first place. He suspected she had been part of a raiding party or scouting mission, but he did not press her on it. What she had been doing before did not matter now. By the third day, Kerra was able to sit up without turning gray, and by the fifth day she could walk around the room, though she still tired easily, and her ribs ached with every breath. Owen had given up his bed for her and was sleeping in the loft, a cramped space under the rafters that was really meant for storage, but he did not mind. It felt good to help someone, to have a purpose beyond just surviving from one season to the next. On the sixth day, Owen came in from the fields to find Kerra sitting at the table instead of lying in bed. She had managed to wash her face and braid her hair, and there was more color in her cheeks, though she still looked battered and worn. "You should be resting," he said, setting down the basket of eggs he had collected. "I have been resting for 6 days. I am going mad lying in that bed." She gestured at the fireplace. "I made porridge. I hope that is all right. I was hungry." Owen looked at the pot hanging over the fire, then back at her. "You did not have to do that. You have been feeding me and caring for me like I am some helpless infant. The least I can do is cook a meal." Her tone was defensive, almost angry, and Owen realized she was uncomfortable being dependent on him. "Well, thank you then. I appreciate it." He got 2 bowls from the shelf and ladled out the porridge, which was thick and well seasoned with herbs he had not even known he had. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the scrape of spoons against wood. "This is good," Owen said finally. "Better than anything I usually make." Kerra shrugged. "Cooking is cooking. It does not matter if you are human or orc. I suppose not." Owen hesitated, then asked, "What will you do? When you are healed, I mean." Her expression shuddered, the brief moment of openness disappearing. "I do not know. I cannot go back to my clan." "Why not?" "Because they left me." The words were flat, emotionless, but Owen could hear the hurt underneath. "When the flood came, we were crossing the river at the shallow ford. The water rose so fast, it swept 3 of us away. I saw my brother Crag make it to the far shore, but he did not come back for me. None of them did. They just kept going." Owen felt a flash of anger on her behalf. "That is horrible. How could they just abandon you? Because I slowed them down. Because in my clan, weakness is death, and I was weak." She stared down at her bowl. "I have always been the smallest, the weakest. My mother was human, you see, captured in a raid when she was young. That makes me half-blood, and half-bloods are never fully trusted, never fully accepted. I have spent my whole life trying to prove I belong, trying to be strong enough, fierce enough, orc enough. But in the end, it did not matter. When it came down to it, they chose to save themselves instead of me." Owen did not know what to say to that. The casual cruelty of it was staggering, so different from his own experience of family, of belonging. "I am sorry," he said finally, knowing the words were inadequate but not having anything better. "It is what it is." Kerra pushed her bowl away, her appetite apparently gone. "I just need to figure out where to go now. I cannot stay here forever." "Why not?" She looked at him in surprise. "Because it is your home. Because I am an orc and you are human, and that matters, whether we want it to or not. Because eventually someone will find out I am here, and then we will both be in danger." "Maybe," Owen allowed. "Or maybe you stay until you are fully healed and we figure out a plan. There are other places, other towns. Some of them are more accepting of orcs, especially in the Western Territories. You could make a new start there." "You have clearly never tried being an orc in a human town," Kerra said dryly, "but I appreciate the optimism. So teach me. Help me understand what it is like for you so I can help you figure out what to do next." Kerra studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes unreadable. "Why do you care so much? You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Owen considered the question, trying to put into words something he barely understood himself. "I spent the last 2 years alone," he said slowly. "After my father died, I thought I was fine with that. I had the farm, I had my work, I did not need anyone else. But the truth is, I was lonely. I did not realize how lonely until you were here, until I had someone to talk to again, someone to care for. Maybe that is selfish of me, but I do not want you to leave. Not yet. Not until you have somewhere safe to go." Something in Kerra's expression softened, just a fraction. "You are a strange man, Owen Varrick. I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one." She stood up carefully, wincing a little at the pull in her ribs. "I am going to rest again. Thank you for the conversation. It is nice to be treated like a person instead of a monster." Owen watched her make her way back to the bed, moving slow but steady. He cleaned up the dishes, thinking about what she had told him, about her clan leaving her behind, about the lifetime of trying to belong somewhere that would never fully accept her. He understood that feeling better than she knew. He had spent his whole life in this valley, but after his parents died, he had felt like a ghost, someone the neighbors acknowledged but never really saw. He did not quite belong either, though for very different reasons. Maybe that was why he felt drawn to her. Maybe that was why helping her felt less like charity and more like salvation for both of them. Over the next week, Kerra grew steadily stronger. She started helping around the house, cooking meals and mending clothes, insisting that she needed to earn her keep. Owen protested at first, but he quickly realized that she needed to feel useful rather than dependent. So he let her help, and found that he enjoyed having a partner in the daily work of living. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing the chores and the meals, talking in the evenings by the fire. Owen learned that Kerra had a sharp sense of humor, dry and understated, that made him laugh in unexpected moments. She learned that Owen was more educated than most farmers, able to read and write, with a small collection of books that had belonged to his mother. She was fascinated by them, having never learned to read herself, and Owen started teaching her, pleased to discover she was a quick study. He also learned that she was an excellent hunter. When she was strong enough to walk outside, she fashioned a bow from materials she found around the farm, displaying a skill with woodcraft that left Owen impressed. She brought back rabbits and wild birds, contributing to their food stores, and Owen felt the knot of worry in his chest ease a little. They would have enough to get through the winter, which had seemed uncertain before. As the days passed, Owen found himself noticing things about Kerra that had nothing to do with practicality. The way she smiled when she finally sounded out a whole sentence in one of his books, her face lighting up with triumph. The graceful efficiency of her movements as she worked, all lean muscle and controlled power. The way her amber eyes caught the firelight in the evenings, glowing like molten gold. He tried not to think about these things, tried to remind himself that she was his guest, someone under his protection, and it would be wrong to develop feelings for her. But the heart did not listen to logic, and Owen found himself looking forward to the moments they spent together, found himself lingering over conversations that could have been shorter, found excuses to be near her. If Kerra noticed, she did not say anything. She seemed content with their arrangement, comfortable in his home in a way she had not been at first. Sometimes, Owen caught her watching him with an expression he could not quite read, something thoughtful and almost wistful, but she always looked away when she realized he had noticed. It was nearly 3 weeks after he had pulled her from the river when everything changed. Owen was coming back from checking the fence line in the south field when he saw smoke rising from the direction of Marcus Vance's farm. A lot of smoke, too much smoke, the kind that meant something was burning that should not be. He ran the rest of the way home, bursting through the door to find Kerra staring out the window, her face pale. "There is a fire," she said, "at the farm to the west. I need to go help." Owen was already grabbing buckets, his mind racing through what he would need. Marcus is old, he might not be able to get it under control on his own. "I am coming with you." "No, you cannot. If Marcus sees you, if anyone sees you, then we will deal with it." "But I am not letting you face a fire alone." Her tone left no room for argument, and Owen did not have time to fight her on it. He nodded tersely, and they both ran out the door, racing across the fields toward the rising smoke. By the time they reached Marcus Vance's farm, the barn was fully engulfed, flames leaping high into the afternoon sky. Marcus himself was running back and forth with buckets, trying desperately to keep the fire from spreading to his house, but it was a losing battle. Owen and Kerra immediately joined in, forming a bucket chain from the well, but the fire was too fierce, too far gone. "The animals!" Marcus shouted over the roar of the flames. "I got the horses out, but the goats are still in there." Before Owen could stop her, Kerra was running toward the barn. "Kerra, no!" he shouted, but she ignored him, disappearing into the smoke and flames. Owen's heart seized in his chest, terror flooding through him. The barn was going to collapse any second, and she was inside. He started to follow her, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "You cannot go in there, boy." It is a death trap. She is in there. Owen tried to pull free, but Marcus held firm, and then Kerra was emerging from the smoke. Two terrified goats clutched against her chest. She set them down in the yard and immediately turned to go back in. No. Owen caught her this time, spinning her around. No more. The barn is lost. You will die if you go back in. There are more. She tried to push past him, her face smudged with soot and ash, her eyes fierce. And you cannot save them all. Owen held her tight, feeling her tremble with the need to try anyway. Please, please, Kerra, do not go back in there. She stared at him, and he saw the moment she surrendered, the fire in her eyes dimming to resignation. They stood there, holding each other as the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber, the heat of it washing over them in waves. When it was finally over, when the barn was just a smoldering ruin and the danger of spread had passed, Marcus Vance turned to look at them properly for the first time. His eyes widened when he saw Kerra, taking in her green skin, her tusks, her pointed ears. "That is an orc," he said, his voice flat with shock. "Her name is Kerra," Owen said, not releasing his hold on her. "She has been staying with me while she recovered from an injury. She just risked her life to save your goats." Marcus looked from Owen to Kerra and back again, his weathered face unreadable. "She is an orc," he repeated, as if Owen had not understood the first time. "I know what she is, and I do not care. She is a good person, Marcus, better than most humans I know." The old man was silent for a long moment, then he sighed, looking suddenly very tired. "Lost my barn," he muttered. "Lost half my herd. Could have lost everything if you had not come." He looked at Kerra directly. "Thank you, for saving what you could." Kerra nodded, clearly surprised. "You are welcome. You can tell the others if you want," Owen said quietly. "About Kerra staying with me, I will understand if you feel you have to." Marcus snorted. "Tell them what? That an orc helped save my farm while my human neighbors were nowhere to be found. That would go over real well." He shook his head. "Your business is your business, Owen. I did not see anything here except two good people helping an old man in need. That is all anyone needs to know." Relief washed through Owen so powerfully he felt dizzy with it. "Thank you, Marcus. Do not thank me. Just take care of each other, and maybe keep her out of sight when other folks come around. Not everyone will be as understanding as me." He looked at the ruins of his barn and sighed again. "I need to figure out what I am going to do about shelter for my animals. Going to be a long night." "We will help," Kerra said immediately. "We can rig up a temporary shelter, get your animals out of the weather." Marcus looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "I would appreciate that." They worked until well past dark, building a makeshift shelter from salvaged lumber and canvas, getting Marcus's surviving animals settled and fed. By the time they walked back to Owen's farm, both of them were exhausted, covered in soot and ash, reeking of smoke. Owen heated water for washing while Kerra collapsed into a chair, her face drawn with fatigue. "That was terrifying," she said quietly. "When the barn was burning, I just kept thinking about the animals trapped inside, and I could not stand it. I had to try to save them." "I know. You were incredibly brave, also incredibly reckless." Owen brought her a basin of warm water and a cloth. "You could have died, but I did not, and we saved two goats. Two goats, and you earned Marcus Vance's respect, which is worth more than gold around here." Owen sat down across from her. "He could have made real trouble for us, but he chose not to. That was a gift. He seems like a good man." "He is. One of the few who has ever treated me like anything other than that strange Varrick boy who keeps to himself." Owen hesitated, then said, "I was terrified when you ran into that barn. I thought I was going to lose you." Kerra looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "You barely know me. That does not seem to matter." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning that Owen had not intended but could not take back. "I care about you, Kerra, more than I probably should." She was very still, her expression unreadable. "Owen, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know." He stood up quickly, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. "I am going to wash up. You should get some rest." He fled to the loft before she could respond, his heart hammering. He had not meant to confess like that, had not meant to put that burden on her, but the fear he had felt watching her disappear into the burning barn had stripped away all his careful control. He cared about her. He might even love her, though that was a terrifying thought for 100 different reasons. Below him, he could hear Kerra moving around, preparing for bed. He waited until the sound stopped, until he was sure she was asleep, before he finally let himself relax. Tomorrow they would have to talk about this, would have to figure out what it meant, if anything. But tonight, he just needed to be grateful they were both alive, both safe, both here. Morning came too soon, gray light filtering through the gaps in the roof. Owen had barely slept, his mind spinning in anxious circles, and he was tempted to stay in the loft until Kerra left to go hunting or something. But that was cowardly, and Owen had never been a coward, so he climbed down the ladder and found her already up, making breakfast as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Morning." Owen moved to help her, and they worked in awkward silence, both of them carefully avoiding the conversation neither wanted to have. It was Kerra who finally broke the silence. "About what you said last night, you do not have to address it. I should not have put that on you. Let me finish." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "You said you care about me. I need you to understand what that means, what you would be taking on. I am an orc. Half orc, technically, but that does not matter to most people. If we are seen together, if anyone suspects there is something between us, you will be ostracized at best, killed at worst. Your life here, your farm, everything you have built, it could all be destroyed. I know that. Do you really understand what you would be giving up?" Her voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. "I have spent my whole life being rejected, being told I do not belong. I do not want to be the reason you lose your place in the world." "My place in the world is wherever I choose to make it," Owen said firmly. "And right now I choose here with you if you want me." Kerra stared at him, her amber eyes wide and vulnerable in a way he had never seen. "I do," she whispered. "I want that more than I can say, but I am afraid, Owen. I am afraid of what it will cost you. Then we will be afraid together." He reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her fingers. "I am not asking you to make any decisions right now. I just want you to know that I am here and I am not going anywhere. Whatever we face it together." She squeezed his hand, and when she looked at him, there were tears in her eyes. "No one has ever chosen me before, not like this." Then they were fools. Owen pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, resting her head against his shoulder. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet morning light, and Owen felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like coming home. The weeks that followed were the happiest Owen could remember in years. He and Kerra were careful not to display their feelings openly when Marcus came by to check on them, or when Owen made his infrequent trips to the village for supplies, but when they were alone, they allowed themselves to be happy. They worked side by side during the day and sat together by the fire at night, reading and talking and simply enjoying each other's company. Kerra continued to improve her reading, devouring Owen's small collection of books with an appetite that delighted him. She was particularly fond of the old adventure tales his mother had loved, stories of heroes and quests in distant lands. Owen loved watching her read, the way her lips moved slightly as she sounded out difficult words, the way her face lit up when she reached an exciting part of the story. They also grew more physically comfortable with each other, small touches and stolen kisses that left Owen dizzy with want. Kerra was cautious about going further, and Owen respected that, but there was an undeniable pull between them, a magnetic attraction that seemed to grow stronger every day. It was mid-autumn when the first snow came, earlier than usual, dusting the valley in white. Owen woke to find frost on the windows and Kerra standing by the hearth, staring into the fire with a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Winter is coming. I should be gathering supplies, finding a proper shelter, preparing." She gestured vaguely at the room. "Instead, I am here, living in comfort, pretending that this can last. It can last. Why would you think otherwise? Because nothing good lasts forever, especially not for people like me." She turned to face him. "Owen, I have been here almost 3 months. Eventually someone is going to figure out that you are harboring an orc. Marcus has been kind, but how long before someone else sees me? How long before the wrong person asks the wrong questions? Then we will deal with it when it happens. You make it sound so simple, because it is simple. I love you, Kerra." The words came out easily, naturally, and Owen realized he had been waiting to say them for weeks. "I love you and I want you to stay, not just for the winter, but always. I want to build a life with you here on this farm. I know it is crazy and probably impossible, but that is what I want." Kerra looked at him like he had just offered her the moon. "You love me," she repeated, as if testing the words. "I do. I have for a while now, I think. I just was not sure how to tell you." "I love you too," she whispered, and then she was kissing him, fierce and desperate and full of longing. Owen kissed her back with equal fervor, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. They stumbled backward toward the bed, months of restrained desire finally breaking free, and for the first time since she had arrived, Kerra did not pull away. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the blankets, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Kerra traced patterns on Owen's chest, her touch gentle. "I have never felt like this before," she said quietly. "Safe, wanted, like I actually belong somewhere. You do belong here with me." Owen pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I meant what I said. I want to build a life with you." "How?" "We cannot exactly walk into the village and announce we are together. And what happens when people start asking questions, when they want to know who you are spending your time with? Then we tell them the truth, or at least part of it. You are my partner, helping me run the farm. If they have a problem with that, it is their problem, not ours." Kerra shook her head, though she was smiling. "You are either the bravest person I have ever met or the most foolish. Can I be both? I suppose you can." She kissed him softly. "I will stay, Owen, for as long as you want me." "Forever, then." "Forever," she agreed, and Owen felt his heart swell with a joy so profound it almost hurt. Winter came in earnest after that, deep snows that buried the valley and kept them isolated on the farm for days at a time. Owen did not mind. He had everything he needed right here: food, shelter, warmth, and Kerra. They spent the long winter evenings reading together, teaching each other skills, making plans for the farm come spring. Kerra taught Owen how to track animals in the snow, how to move silently through the forest, how to read the signs of changing weather. Owen taught her more about reading and writing, basic arithmetic, the history of the valley and the families who lived there. They learned each other's stories, the good and the bad, building a foundation of trust and understanding that felt unshakable. It was not all perfect. There were hard moments, times when Kerra's past trauma surfaced and she withdrew into herself, or when Owen's fear of losing her made him overprotective. They argued sometimes, sharp words exchanged in the heat of frustration, but they always worked through it, always came back to each other with apologies and understanding. Marcus visited a few times when the weather allowed, never commenting directly on Kerra's presence, but always polite and respectful. He brought news from the village, mostly mundane gossip, but once he mentioned that there had been increased orc activity near the southern border, raids that had everyone on edge. Owen noticed the way Kerra went very still when Marcus mentioned it, and after the old man left, he asked her about it. "It might be my old clan," she said quietly. "They usually raid more during the winter when supplies run low. I just hope they do not come this far north." "If they do, we will handle it," Owen said, though privately he worried. He had no illusions about his ability to fight off a group of orc raiders, and he had no idea what Kerra would do if faced with her former clan. Would she fight them to protect him, or would old loyalties reassert themselves? He tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the present instead of worrying about the future. But it was hard not to feel a creeping sense of dread as the winter wore on. The dreaded encounter came in late winter, when the snow was starting to melt and the first hints of spring were appearing. Owen was out cutting firewood when he heard Kerra shout from the house, her voice sharp with alarm. He dropped his axe and ran, his heart in his throat, expecting to find raiders or worse. Instead, he found Kerra standing in the doorway, staring at a lone orc warrior who stood in the yard. The warrior was massive, easily a head taller than Kerra, with arms like tree trunks and a scarred, brutal face. He wore the same kind of leather armor Kerra had been wearing when Owen found her, and he carried a huge battle axe that looked like it could split a man in half with one swing. "Crag," Kerra said, her voice tight with tension. "What are you doing here?" The warrior, Crag, looked her up and down with an expression of disgust. "I came to see if the rumors were true. They said someone spotted an orc living on this farm, and I thought, no, it could not be my weak little sister. She surely drowned in the flood. But here you are, alive and apparently living with a human." He spat the last word like a curse. "You left me to die," Kerra said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "You saw the water take me and you just kept walking. Because you were dead weight. You have always been dead weight, Kerra, too small, too weak, too human. The clan is better off without you." Crag's gaze shifted to Owen, and there was murder in his eyes. "And now you shame us further by living with this human filth." "Watch your mouth," Owen said, stepping forward to stand beside Kerra. His hand moved to the knife at his belt, though he knew it would be useless against that axe. Crag laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "The little human wants to defend you. How touching. Tell me, sister, do you warm his bed at night? Do you play at being human for him?" "Leave, Crag," Kerra said, her voice hard now. "Leave and do not come back. I am not part of your clan anymore." "You were never part of our clan. Mother was human trash and you are human trash, and now you have proven it for everyone to see." Crag hefted his axe. "The clan sent me to kill you to end the shame you have brought on our name. I told them I would, and I am a male of my word." He moved with shocking speed for someone so large, the axe swinging toward Kerra's head. Owen shouted and tried to intervene, but Kerra was already moving, ducking under the blow and rolling away. She came up with a stout branch from the woodpile, not much of a weapon but better than nothing. "Owen, run!" she shouted, circling her brother. "Get out of here. I am not leaving you." Owen grabbed his fallen axe, the blade meant for wood but sharp enough to hurt. He had never been in a real fight before, had no idea what to do, but he would not abandon Kerra. Crag seemed to find this amusing. "2 against 1, and still I will crush you both." He swung at Kerra again, a blow that would have taken her head off if she had not ducked. The axe buried itself in a fence post, and while Crag wrenched it free, Owen charged, swinging his own axe in a wild arc. He managed to clip Crag's shoulder, drawing blood, and the big orc roared in pain and fury. He backhanded Owen almost casually, and Owen went flying, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He lay there gasping, his vision swimming, trying to get up, but his body was not responding through blurred eyes. He saw Kerra attack her brother with a ferocity he had never witnessed, the branch in her hands moving like a sword. She was fast, so much faster than Crag, darting in and out, landing blows on his arms, his legs, his ribs. But the branch was just wood, and Crag was heavily armored, and Owen could see that she was not doing enough damage to stop him. Crag caught her eventually, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her off the ground. "You could have been strong," he snarled. "If you had just tried harder, if you had been more orc and less human. But you chose weakness, chose this pathetic life, and now you will die for it." Owen forced himself to move, pain shooting through his ribs as he staggered upright. He saw his axe lying nearby and grabbed it, then charged at Crag with a roar of pure desperation. He swung with all his strength, aiming for the back of the big orc's knee, and felt the blade bite deep into flesh and tendon. Crag screamed and dropped Kerra, his leg buckling under him. He fell to one knee, trying to turn on Owen, but Kerra was already there, snatching up Crag's own axe which had fallen in the chaos. She swung it in a vicious arc, catching her brother in the side with a meaty thunk that made Owen's stomach turn. Crag toppled over, blood spreading across the snow. He looked up at Kerra with something like surprise in his eyes. "You actually did it," he rasped. "You actually chose the human over your own blood." "You stopped being my blood when you left me to die," Kerra said coldly. "And I choose Owen because he is a better person than you will ever be." Crag laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "The clan will come for you, they will come for both of you. Let them come." Kerra dropped the axe, clearly sickened by what she had done, and went to Owen. "Are you all right?" "I think so. Bruised, maybe a cracked rib, but alive." He pulled her into his arms, both of them shaking with adrenaline and fear. "You were incredible. I had to protect you. I could not let him hurt you." She looked back at her brother, who was still breathing but clearly dying. "I killed him, Owen. I killed my own brother." "He would have killed us both. You did what you had to do." Owen held her tighter. "I am sorry you had to make that choice." Kerra was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "He was right about one thing. The clan will come. They will want revenge, and they will not stop until we are both dead. Then we need to be ready for them. We need a plan." Owen's mind was already racing, thinking through their options. "Marcus will help us, I think. And there are others, people who owe me favors or who might be sympathetic. We can organize a defense, make this farm a fortress if we have to. Or we could run. We could head west to those territories you mentioned, start fresh where no one knows us." "We could," Owen agreed. "But this is my home, Kerra, my family's home. I do not want to run if we do not have to." She pulled back to look at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "Are you sure? This will not be easy. It might be a fight we cannot win." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. We make our stand here together." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you. I am not going to let anyone take you from me or take me from you. We will find a way through this." Kerra kissed him, tasting of salt and tears and determination. "Then we fight, together." They buried Crag in the south field, a shallow grave in the frozen ground, and then they got to work. Owen rode to Marcus Vance's farm and told him everything, expecting anger or rejection but finding instead a grim determination. Marcus had lost his son to an orc raid 20 years ago, but he had also been saved by Kerra, and that debt mattered to him. "I will help," the old man said. "And I can rally some of the others, the ones I trust. We cannot let a bunch of raiders think they can terrorize honest folk, orc or human." True to his word, Marcus gathered a small group of farmers and laborers, men who were tired of living in fear, who were willing to fight to protect their homes. Owen was surprised and humbled by their support, even more so when they did not reject Kerra, but instead listened to her advice on orc tactics and raiding patterns. They spent 2 weeks fortifying the farm, building barricades and preparing weapons, stockpiling supplies in case of a siege. Kerra was invaluable, her knowledge of orc warfare giving them insights they would never have had otherwise. She taught them how orcs attacked, where they were vulnerable, how to use terrain and surprise to their advantage. The raid came on a cold, clear night just as the last of the snow was melting. Kerra spotted them first, a group of 20 orc warriors moving through the trees at the edge of the property. She woke Owen with a hand over his mouth, her eyes fierce in the darkness. "They are here." Owen roused the others, 10 men including himself and Marcus, all of them armed and nervous but ready. They took their positions behind the barricades, waiting as the orcs advanced across the open ground. Kerra stood at the center, her bow in hand, an arrow nocked and ready. The orcs came with a roar, charging across the field with weapons raised. Kerra fired first, her arrow taking down the lead orc, and then everyone was shooting, a hail of arrows and crossbow bolts that cut through the charging warriors. Half of them fell before they reached the barricades, and the rest crashed into the defenses with brutal force. It was chaos after that, a desperate melee of slashing blades and screaming voices. Owen fought with his axe, trying to protect the gaps in the barricades, trying to keep the orcs from breaking through. He saw Marcus go down with a wound to his shoulder, saw one of the other farmers dragged over the barricade and lost in the press of bodies. But the defenders held. They held because they were fighting for their homes, their families, their right to live in peace. And they held because Kerra was there, a force of nature, her arrows finding targets with unerring accuracy, her voice calling out warnings and encouragement. The tide turned when Kerra shot the orc war leader, a massive female with a horned helm and a voice like thunder. She fell with an arrow in her throat, and the other orcs faltered, their coordination breaking down. That was when Owen and the others pressed the attack, pushing out from behind the barricades, driving the raiders back. The orcs broke and ran, the survivors disappearing into the forest, leaving their dead behind. The defenders cheered, exhausted and bloodied but victorious. Owen found Kerra in the aftermath, kneeling beside Marcus, helping bandage the old man's shoulder. "We did it," he said, hardly believing it. "We actually did it." "We did," Kerra agreed, but there was no triumph in her voice, only sadness. She looked at the bodies scattered across the field, orcs and humans both, and Owen saw the weight of it in her eyes. So much death, but we are alive. That is what matters. Owen pulled her to her feet and into his arms, holding her close. "You saved us all, Kerra. You are a hero." "I am a killer," she said quietly. "I killed my own people. You protected your home and the people you love. There is no shame in that." Owen tipped her chin up so she had to look at him. "You are the bravest person I know. I am so proud of you." She held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. And Owen held her back just as tightly, grateful beyond words that they were both still standing. The aftermath of the battle was difficult. They had lost 2 men, good people who had fought to defend a way of life they believed in, and the grief was heavy. But they had also won, had proven that humans and orcs could fight side by side, could work together toward a common goal. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt significant, like the beginning of something new. Marcus recovered from his wound and became a staunch ally, spreading word of what had happened, of how Kerra had helped defend the valley from raiders. The story grew in the telling, as stories do, until Kerra was being spoken of as a hero, the orc who had chosen peace over violence, who had stood with humans against her own kind. Not everyone was convinced. There were still those who viewed orcs as monsters, who believed Kerra was an aberration or worse, a trick to lull them into complacency. But there were also those who were willing to give her a chance, to judge her by her actions rather than her heritage. It was a start. As spring arrived in full, bringing warmth and new growth, Owen and Kerra worked to rebuild what had been damaged in the battle and to expand the farm. They planted crops together, mended fences, built a new chicken coop to replace the one the flood had destroyed. It was hard work, but it was satisfying, the kind of labor that left them tired but content at the end of each day. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Owen turned to Kerra and took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about us." "What about us?" Kerra asked, though there was a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I want to marry you. I know it might not be legal or recognized or whatever the proper term is, but I do not care. I want to stand up in front of everyone and declare that you are mine and I am yours, for as long as we both live." Kerra's eyes went wide, and for a moment Owen thought he had made a terrible mistake, had pushed too far too fast. But then she was laughing, tears streaming down her face and pulling him into a fierce hug. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Varrick. I will marry you and spend the rest of my life with you, and I do not care what anyone else thinks about it." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony in the field behind the farmhouse. Marcus stood as witness, along with a handful of the farmers who had fought beside them in the battle. There was no priest, no official sanction, just Owen and Kerra standing together under the open sky, speaking vows they had written themselves. Owen promised to love her, to protect her, to stand by her no matter what came. Kerra promised the same, her voice strong and clear, her amber eyes shining with tears. They exchanged simple bands of woven grass, a temporary symbol until Owen could afford proper rings, and then they kissed as husband and wife while their small audience cheered. It was not a grand wedding, not the kind of celebration that happened in the villages with feasting and dancing that lasted for days. But it was theirs, and it was perfect, and when Owen looked at Kerra in her simple dress with wildflowers in her hair, he thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They celebrated quietly that evening, just the two of them, sharing a meal and talking late into the night about their dreams for the future. Kerra wanted to start a garden, to grow vegetables and herbs they could sell in the village. Owen wanted to expand the farm, maybe buy some cattle or sheep. They wanted to build a larger house eventually, something with room for a family, though neither of them said that part out loud. It felt too fragile, too precious, like speaking the wish might jinx it, but the hope was there, shining between them like a candle in the dark. Summer came, hot and bright, and with it came more changes. Word had spread about the orc woman living on the Varrick farm, and people started coming by to see for themselves, curious or suspicious, or sometimes just lonely. Kerra was wary at first, but Owen encouraged her to be open, to let people see who she really was. It worked, slowly but surely. The visitors saw an orc woman who was polite and hardworking, who could discuss crop rotations and animal husbandry as easily as any human farmer, who was clearly devoted to her husband. They saw someone who was not so different from themselves, and their fear began to ease. There were still incidents, still people who refused to accept Kerra, or who muttered threats when they thought no one was listening. But there were also those who defended her, who stood up and said that she had as much right to live in the valley as anyone else. The tide was turning, inch by painful inch. One day in late summer, A young orc woman appeared at the farm, thin and frightened and begging for help. Her name was Gritha, and she had been cast out from her clan for refusing to fight, for questioning the endless cycle of raids and violence. She had heard rumors of an orc living peacefully among humans and had come seeking sanctuary. Kerra and Owen took her in without hesitation, giving her food and shelter and safety. Gritha stayed for several weeks, helping with the farm work and slowly regaining her strength and confidence. When she finally left, it was to travel west to the territories Kerra had mentioned, to seek a new life where the old prejudices did not hold such sway. But before she left, she told them that there were others like her, orcs who were tired of the violence, who wanted something different. "You have shown that it is possible," she said to Kerra. "You have shown that orcs and humans can live together, can build something beautiful. That is a powerful thing." After Gritha left, more came. Not many, just a trickle, but each one represented a life saved, a chance at something better. Owen and Kerra could not house them all, but they helped where they could, offering advice and supplies, pointing them toward communities that might be more accepting. They became a bridge, in a way, between the two worlds that had been at war for so long. It was dangerous work, and there were setbacks, moments when Owen wondered if they were making any real difference. But then he would look at Kerra, at the hope in her eyes, at the way she smiled when she helped someone find their path, and he knew it was worth it. Autumn arrived again, marking a full year since Kerra had come into his life, since he had pulled her from the willow roots and carried her home. They stood by the river one evening, watching the water flow past, so much calmer now than it had been that terrible day. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not found you?" Owen asked. "If the flood had taken you, or if I had decided not to help all the time," Kerra admitted. "I think about how different my life would be, how empty. And I am grateful every single day that you were there, that you chose to save me when you had no reason to. I had a reason. I just did not know it yet." Owen pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "You were meant to be here, Kerra, with me. I truly believe that." "I believe it too." She turned in his arms to face him. "I have something to tell you, something important." Owen's heart skipped a beat at the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "I am pregnant." The words came out in a rush, and Kerra looked at him with a mixture of joy and fear. "I know we did not plan this, and I know it will be complicated, but Owen, I am so happy. I want this baby, want this family with you." Owen felt like the world had stopped, like everything had narrowed down to this single perfect moment. "You are pregnant," he repeated, wonder flooding through him. "We are going to have a baby." "We are." Kerra's smile was radiant. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Owen laughed, picking her up and spinning her around. "I am ecstatic. This is the best news I have ever heard." They held each other by the river, talking about the future, about the child they would raise together, about the world they hoped to build for them. It would not be easy. There would be challenges, prejudice to overcome, dangers to face. But they would face it all together. Owen and Kerra, human and orc, husband and wife. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Owen thought about the journey that had brought them here, about all the small choices and strange twists of fate that had led to this moment. A flood that had nearly killed Kerra, a willow tree that had held her safe, a man who had decided to help when he could have walked away, and from that, a love that defied every boundary, every expectation, every rule about who could be with whom and what kind of life they could build. Owen looked at Kerra, at the woman who had become his whole world, and knew that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every risk, every fight, every moment of fear and doubt, it had all been worth it to get here, to this perfect evening with the promise of a future stretching out before them. "I love you," he said, the words never feeling like enough but all he had to offer. "I love you too," Kerra replied, and in that moment everything else fell away. There was just them, just this love they had built from nothing, just the life they would create together. The willow tree stood by the river, its roots reaching deep into the earth and the water, a silent witness to the miracle of two souls finding each other against all odds. And if trees could smile, this one surely did, watching over the farm as the seasons turned and the years unfolded, as Owen and Kerra raised their daughter and then a son, as they grew old together in the home they had built with their own hands. The prejudice did not disappear overnight. There were still hard moments, still people who could not accept what they represented. But slowly, over the years, things changed. More orcs came to the valley, seeking peace instead of war. More humans learned to see past their fear. The borders between the two communities began to blur, and while it was never perfect, it was better, so much better than it had been. And at the center of it all was a small farm by a willow tree, where a human man had once saved an orc woman from drowning, and in doing so, had saved himself. Where love had taken root in the most unlikely soil, and grown into something strong and lasting, something that changed the world one heart at a time. Years later, when their children were grown and starting families of their own, Owen and Kerra would sit on the porch in the evenings and watch the sun set over the fields they had worked together for so long. Kerra's hair was streaked with gray now, and Owen's hands were gnarled with age, but when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had stood by the river all those years ago and promised to build a life together. "You have any regrets?" Kerra asked one evening, her hand in his. Owen thought about it, really thought about it. He thought about the struggles they had faced, the battles fought and the tears shed. He thought about the children they had raised, half human and half orc, who had grown up knowing they were loved and wanted despite what the world might say. He thought about the community they had helped build, where humans and orcs worked side by side, where the old hatreds were fading into memory. "Not a single one," he said finally. "Everything we went through brought us here to this moment, to this life. I would not change any of it." Kerra smiled, that same radiant smile that had captured his heart so long ago. "Neither would I." They sat together as the stars came out, two souls intertwined, a love story that had begun with a flood and a willow tree and a choice to show kindness to a stranger. And if that was not magic, if that was not proof that the world could change for the better, then Owen did not know what was. The farm would pass to their children eventually, and then to their children's children, a legacy of hope and perseverance and love that refused to be bound by the narrow definitions others tried to impose. The willow tree would continue to stand by the river, its roots growing deeper with each passing year, a living monument to the day everything changed. And in the house that Owen and Kerra had built together, in the fields they had tended and the life they had created, their story would be told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose kindness, choose love, choose to see the person behind the prejudice. Because in the end, that was what had saved them both. Not grand gestures or heroic battles, though those had their place, but the simple decision to care about another person, to offer help when it was needed, to build something together instead of tearing each other apart. As Owen and Kerra grew old together, surrounded by family and friends, by the community they had helped shape, they knew they had been given something precious. Not an easy life, not a perfect life, but a good life, a meaningful life, a life filled with love. And when Owen finally passed, many years later with Kerra holding his hand and their children gathered around, his last words were of gratitude. Gratitude for the flood that had brought her to him, for the willow that had kept her safe, for every moment they had shared. Kerra lived several years more, carrying his memory in her heart, continuing the work they had started together. She became a respected elder in the community, a voice of wisdom and reconciliation, proof that change was possible if you were willing to fight for it. And when she finally joined Owen, she was buried beside him in the field behind the farmhouse, under the shade of a new willow tree their children had planted. The inscription on their shared stone was simple. Here lie Owen Varrick and Kerra, who loved each other and changed the world. It was the truth, pure and simple. They had changed the world, maybe not all of it, but their little corner of it. They had shown that love could bridge any divide, that kindness could overcome hatred, that two people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. The willow by the river continued to grow, its branches reaching toward the sky, its roots deep in the earth and water. And if you sat beneath it on a quiet evening, you could almost hear the whisper of an old story, the tale of a flood and a rescue, and a love that refused to be denied. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth carrying forward into the future. Because in a world that often seemed determined to tear itself apart, stories like this were a reminder of what was possible, of what we could build if we chose love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, hope over despair. Owen and Kerra's story became legend in the valley, told to children at bedtime and to travelers passing through. Some details changed with each telling, as stories do, but the heart of it remained the same. A human man who saved an orc woman, and in doing so, discovered a love that transformed both their lives. Their descendants carried that legacy forward, generation after generation, building on the foundation Owen and Kerra had laid. The valley became known as a place of peace, where humans and orcs lived together in harmony, where the old divisions had been replaced with understanding and cooperation. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still moments of misunderstanding and pain. But there was also hope and compassion, and the knowledge that it was possible to be better, to do better, to create a world where everyone had a place. And it all started with a flood, a willow tree, and a man who chose to carry an unconscious orc girl home and give her a chance at a new life. From that simple act of kindness, everything else had grown, like a seed planted in fertile soil, reaching toward the light. The story of Owen and Kerra reminds us that we all have that power, to change someone's life with a single choice, to create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. All it takes is the courage to reach out, to offer help, to choose love even when it is difficult or dangerous or seemingly impossible. Their love was a revolution, quiet and persistent, transforming hearts and minds one person at a time. And in the end, that was the most powerful magic of all. The simple, profound truth that we are all connected, all worthy of love and belonging, regardless of what we look like or where we come from. The willow tree stands still, a silent guardian of memory and hope, its roots tangled in the earth where an orc girl once hung suspended between life and death, where a human man once made the choice to save her. And from those roots, a love story grew that would be told for generations, a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the unbreakable strength of two hearts choosing each other against all odds. In the end, Owen and Kerra's story is not just about them. It is about all of us, about the choices we make and the world we create with those choices. It is a reminder that love is always worth fighting for, that bridges can be built across any divide, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the simplest acts of human decency. As the years continue to pass, and the valley continues to grow and change, the story of Owen and Kerra remains a touchstone, a source of inspiration and hope. Because if they could find love in the midst of so much division and fear, if they could build a life together despite everything working against them, then surely we can do the same. Their legacy lives on in every act of kindness between former enemies, in every friendship that crosses boundaries, in every love that refuses to be limited by prejudice or fear. It lives on in the willow tree by the river, in the farm that still bears the Varrick name, in the community that has become a beacon of what is possible when we choose understanding over hatred. And so the story ends where it began, by the river with the willow tree, where an orc girl once hung tangled in its roots, and a human man chose to save her. From that moment, everything changed, not just for them, but for everyone they touched, everyone who heard their story and decided to believe that love could conquer all. It was a good ending, a happy ending, the kind that reminds us why we tell stories in the first place. To remember that hope is real, that change is possible, and that love in all its forms is the most powerful force in the world. Owen and Kerra would have been pleased to know their story lived on, that their love continued to inspire long after they were gone. They never sought fame or recognition, only the chance to live together in peace, to build something good and lasting. And in doing so, they gave the world something precious. Proof that it is possible to rise above our divisions, to see the person behind the label, to love across boundaries that others insist cannot be crossed. Their story is a gift, freely given, to anyone who needs reminding that we are capable of so much more than we often believe. We are capable of courage in the face of fear, of compassion in the face of hatred, of love in the face of everything that tries to keep us apart. And so, as the sun sets one final time on this tale, we leave the valley in peace, knowing that Owen and Kerra's love continues to shine like a beacon, guiding others toward a better, kinder, more hopeful future. The flood may have brought them together, but it was their choice to stay together, to build a life and a love that would endure, that made all the difference. The willow tree whispers in the breeze, carrying their story forward, and in that whisper is a promise. That love will always find a way, that kindness will always matter, and that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single act of compassion on an ordinary morning by the river's edge.